Forgiveness, for a Sigma male, is not an emotional reset. It's a restructuring of everything he once allowed. He doesn't forgive loudly, doesn't make a performance out of healing, and doesn't demand apologies to soothe his ego. His process happens in silence, behind the calm exterior no one can read. People often mistake that quiet forgiveness as an invitation back into his world. But what they don't understand is that forgiveness does not restore what was broken. It simply removes the weight from his mind. He lets go, but he never forgets the truth that was revealed. When someone crosses his boundaries or wounds his trust, something fundamental shifts inside him. He stops seeing the person as who they were and starts seeing them as what they showed him. And once his perspective evolves, it never reverses. He can forgive your mistake, but he will not undo the clarity it gave him. His return is never the same because the connection is now filtered through new understanding, one that protects him instead of exposing him. His silence after forgiveness isn't distance, it's wisdom. It's the adjustment that keeps him from ever getting hurt the same way twice. If you want to understand the deeper psychology behind why Sigma males forgive without returning to who they were before, stay with me. And before we dive in, subscribe to Silent Wise for more insight into the rare, unspoken mindsets that shape the Sigma experience. Let's break down the truths behind quiet forgiveness and why the man who comes back is never the man who left. He forgives to free himself, not to rebuild the relationship. Forgiveness for him is a release, not a reunion. When he forgives, he isn't reopening the door, offering a reset, or pretending nothing happened. He's cutting the emotional thread that would otherwise keep him tied to disappointment, resentment, or unfinished conflict. He forgives because he refuses to carry someone else's mistake as a burden on his mind. Letting go is how he restores his clarity, not how he restores the bond. People often misinterpret his quiet forgiveness as softness or an invitation back into the same closeness, but what they fail to realize is that he forgives to liberate himself, not to repair what was broken. The moment he releases the anger, he also releases the old version of the relationship permanently. In his world, forgiveness is a solo process, one that happens internally, without announcements or emotional theatrics. He doesn't need apologies to validate his decision, nor explanations to soothe his ego. He already analyzed the situation, understood its meaning, and made peace with the truth it revealed. Rebuilding isn't part of his healing. Detachment is. Once he forgives, he no longer feels the need to argue, to demand better treatment, or to chase closure. Forgiveness closes the emotional account, but it does not reopen the relational one. That's why his energy feels different afterward, lighter, sharper, but undeniably more distant. He has freed himself, and freedom changes his direction. What makes his forgiveness so misunderstood is that it looks gentle from the outside, yet it marks a quiet turning point inside him. He's not forgiving to reconnect, he's forgiving to move forward without carrying emotional residue. He knows that rebuilding requires trust, and trust cannot be restored with the same simplicity as forgiveness. Forgiveness is his choice, reconnection is not. So once he lets go, he doesn't return to the version of himself that once tolerated, believed, or hoped. That version is gone. His forgiveness is closure for him, not comfort for the other person. And when he walks away from the emotional weight, he leaves the old dynamic behind with it, without hesitation, without regret, and without returning the same. He no longer trusts the same way once betrayal has been revealed. Trust, for him, is not something rebuilt with apologies or promises. It's a structure that fractures the moment betrayal appears. Even if he forgives, even if he moves on peacefully, the internal shift is irreversible. Once he sees what someone is capable of in a moment of weakness, selfishness, or dishonesty, he never unsees it. Betrayal becomes a reference point, a quiet marker that changes how he calculates your presence in his life. He no longer extends the same openness, the same vulnerability, or the same access to his inner world. It's not revenge, it's recalibration. He adapts to the truth you showed him, and that adaptation creates a distance that cannot be undone. His trust is built slowly, intentionally, through observation and consistency. It isn't a casual offering but an earned position. So when someone breaks it, even slightly, he doesn't rage or retaliate, he simply updates his understanding of who they are. He becomes more cautious, more measured, more selective with what he shares. He listens differently. He watches more closely. The ease that once existed is replaced by analysis, not because he's holding a grudge, but because he refuses to place his emotional security in hands that already failed the test. The bond may remain, conversations may continue, but the foundation beneath them is forever altered. What makes this shift so profound is that he never announces it. He doesn't declare that his trust has changed, he just behaves differently. He protects more, he reveals less, he expects little. The relationship doesn't collapse dramatically, it simply transforms quietly into something more distant, more guarded, more strategic. He can forgive the pain, but he cannot restore the innocence that existed before it. Once betrayal enters the picture, trust doesn't break loudly, it dissolves silently, and a Sigma male never tries to rebuild what a person chose to destroy. He adjusts, moves forward, and never returns to the same emotional openness again. His emotional distance after forgiveness is a permanent boundary. When he forgives, people often expect a return to emotional closeness. The same warmth, the same openness, the same effortless connection they once enjoyed. But forgiveness for him is not a bridge back, it's a boundary forward. The emotional distance that appears afterward is not temporary, not a phase, and not a silent punishment. It is a recalibrated perimeter, a new line drawn from the clarity the situation forced him to see. He doesn't broadcast this shift, yet it is unmistakable. His presence becomes quieter, his response is more measured, his energy more contained. He's still polite, still composed, still capable of kindness, but the intimacy that once flowed freely is now guarded behind a door he no longer leaves unlocked. This distance forms because forgiveness resolved the emotion, not the impact. He may release the hurt, but he does not erase the knowledge gained from it. Emotional closeness requires safety, and once that safety is breached, he no longer feels inclined to offer the same vulnerability. He becomes more observant, less trusting, and far more selective with what part of himself he shares. The connection continues, but on reduced terms, not out of resentment, but out of self-respect. He knows letting someone close again without adjustment would invite the same wound twice. So he keeps his heart several steps behind his words, and his trust several layers beneath his calm. The permanence of this boundary is what people underestimate. They mistake his forgiveness for an emotional reset, assuming the relationship can return to what it was before, but he never goes backward. Once distance has been installed, it becomes part of the new structure of the relationship, shaping every interaction that follows. He no longer confides the way he once did, no longer relies on the person the way he once allowed himself to, and no longer invests at the previous depth. The bond is not broken, it's redefined. His emotional distance is the reminder of what was learned and the protection against repeating it. It is his way of honoring himself without creating conflict, and it remains quietly and permanently long after forgiveness has been given. He adjusts his expectations, removing the depth he once offered. When someone hurts him, the first thing he recalibrates isn't his attitude, it's his expectations. He no longer assumes loyalty, no longer expects consistency, and no longer offers the emotional depth he once gave freely. This shift is subtle but profound. Where he once poured effort, he now gives only what the connection has proven it can hold. Where he once shared deeply, he now shares selectively. This adjustment isn't born from bitterness, it's born from clarity. He realizes that not everyone is capable of handling the intensity, honesty, or sincerity he naturally brings. So he scales back. He gives less of his inner world, less of his time, less of his emotional investment. The relationship doesn't end, it simply loses the weight it once carried. This quiet recalibration protects him. Expectations are where disappointment grows, and after betrayal, he removes the possibility of being blindsided again. He stops expecting the person to show up with the same loyalty, the same attention, or the same emotional integrity he once believed in. He replaces idealism with realism, a grounded assessment of who the person actually is, not who he hoped they were. And once he sees the truth, he aligns his behavior with it. He no longer overextends. He no longer reads depth where there is only convenience. He no longer invests in potential over reality. The shift feels gentle on the surface, but it marks a permanent restructuring of how he engages. People often misread this change as coldness or withdrawal, but it is neither. It is simply the version of him that matches what the situation has proven. He is still capable of kindness, connection, and respect, but the depth, the vulnerability, the emotional richness he once brought, those stay protected. Once expectations are adjusted, the dynamic becomes lighter, safer, and less emotionally demanding. This is how he ensures he is never hurt the same way twice. He forgives, but he does not return the same, because he will never again offer a level of access that someone has already shown they cannot honor. He becomes more observant, analyzing behavior instead of believing words. Once trust has been shaken, he shifts into a different mode. Quieter, sharper, and far more analytical. He no longer takes words at face value, no matter how sincere they sound or how beautifully they are packaged. Apologies, promises, explanations, he hears them, but he does not rely on them. Instead, he watches. He studies tone, timing, patterns, and follow-through. Betrayal teaches him that words are the easiest currency to spend, but the hardest to honor. So after forgiveness, his perception evolves. He becomes a silent observer, measuring truth by consistency, not expression. What someone does becomes infinitely louder than what they say, and he pays attention to every detail that once slipped by unnoticed. This heightened observation isn't suspicion, it's protection. He has learned that people reveal their character in small, unguarded moments, in how they react under pressure, in how they speak when they want something, in how they behave when they think no one is watching. He watches for alignment between intention and action, promise and behavior, interest and effort. When the two match, trust can slowly rebuild in a restrained, cautious form. When the two diverge, he updates his understanding instantly. The difference now is that he no longer ignores red flags or excuses inconsistencies. He sees them clearly, accepts them truthfully, and adjusts accordingly. What makes this shift so powerful is its quiet nature. He doesn't announce that he's observing more. He doesn't warn or confront. He simply relies on evidence rather than emotion. The person may feel the change without knowing exactly when it happened. His silence lasts a little longer. His reactions soften into neutrality. His emotional presence becomes measured instead of open. He's not punishing anyone. He's simply refusing to build trust on anything but behavior. And because actions rarely lie, he rebuilds his world based on reality, not hope. His forgiveness may be gentle, but his observation afterward is relentless. It is the reason he never returns the same. Once truth has been revealed, he watches everything with new eyes. He no longer invests energy where loyalty was uncertain. Once loyalty becomes questionable, his investment changes instantly and permanently. He no longer pours his time, attention, or emotional depth into a place that proved it couldn't hold it. Before the betrayal, he may have given generously, not because he was naive, but because he believed in the bond. Afterward, that belief dissolves. He forgives, but forgiveness doesn't restore the value of the connection. It simply clears the emotional weight so he can walk forward with clarity. And with that clarity comes a sharp recalibration. He stops overextending, stops initiating, stops offering the emotional consistency he once brought effortlessly. His energy becomes reserved, focused, and protected from those who showed they could not be trusted with it. This shift isn't fueled by anger, it's fueled by understanding. He realizes that loyalty is not proven by words, closeness, or history. It is proven by action when pressure appears. When someone shows uncertainty, hesitation, or betrayal in a moment where loyalty mattered, he registers it as truth. And he never invests in a truth that doesn't align with his core values. Instead of asking why they did it, he asks, what does this reveal? That revelation becomes the compass that guides his future behavior. He no longer tries to nurture a connection that once fractured. He simply stops giving it the energy required to thrive. To him, protecting his peace is far more important than reviving what was already compromised. People often feel this shift but don't understand it. They see him becoming quieter, harder to reach, less emotionally available. They interpret it as punishment, when in reality, it's just alignment. He has rebalanced the equation, matching his effort to the loyalty he actually received, not the loyalty he once believed in. And because he never forces bonds to survive, the connection naturally weakens without his support. This is how he ensures he never gets hurt the same way twice. He stops feeding uncertain loyalties with certain effort. His forgiveness may free him emotionally, but his withdrawal of energy is what protects him spiritually, mentally, and psychologically. He protects his peace by limiting access to his inner world. After he forgives, the doorway into his inner world narrows, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. He knows that peace is not something stumbled upon. It's something guarded. Before the betrayal, He may have spoken freely, shared deeply, and allowed his thoughts, vulnerabilities, and hopes to be seen. But once someone fractures that trust, he learns exactly where the openings in his armor were, and he closes them. His forgiveness clears the emotional residue, but it doesn't reopen the gate. Instead, he becomes far more selective about what parts of himself he reveals. The warmth, the openness, the emotional transparency he once offered naturally becomes layered behind intentional distance. It is not coldness, it is protection. He understands that his inner world is the core of his strength. His peace, his clarity, his intuition, his self-awareness. These are not things he offers casually anymore. When someone has shown they cannot handle the responsibility of being close to him, he adapts by keeping his interior life intact and untouched by their influence. His thoughts become quieter, his feelings more private, and his motivations harder to read. He doesn't shut down, he simply stops granting unearned access. Conversations may continue, but they no longer reach the depth that once defined the connection. The version of him they hurt is no longer available, and the version they face now is filtered through discernment. People often sense this change but can't explain it. They feel the distance, the shift in emotional availability, the reduction in closeness. Yet he remains polite, calm, and steady. That's because he no longer allows them inside the places where they could do damage again. He protects his peace like a territory that must be defended, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. He knows that allowing the wrong person into his inner world twice is not forgiveness. It's self-betrayal. So he forgives to release the weight, but he guards his heart to preserve the clarity. Once he limits access, he becomes someone they can see but never fully reach again. He evolves after being hurt, and evolution never moves backward. Pain doesn't break him. It transforms him. When he's hurt, he doesn't cling to the wound or replay the betrayal in endless loops. Instead, he steps into a deeper layer of self-awareness, analyzing what the experience revealed about others, about himself, and about the boundaries he must strengthen. He treats every emotional impact as a catalyst, not a setback. People expect him to return to the same version of himself after forgiveness, but what they don't understand is that he never returns to any former version. He outgrows it. The hurt becomes information, the forgiveness becomes release, and the transformation that follows becomes permanent. In his evolution, he doesn't become colder, he becomes clearer. He sheds naive expectations, eliminates emotional vulnerabilities that were misused, and refines the way he offers himself to the world. This growth is subtle but undeniable, a shift in how he listens, how he responds, how he chooses, and how he protects himself. He becomes a sharper observer, a stronger boundary setter, a more intentional giver. What once hurt him now shapes him into someone more resilient, more self-defined, and far less accessible to those who failed to value him the first time. People often try to reconnect with the man they knew before, only to find a version of him they cannot influence, predict, or penetrate. And this is why he never returns the same. Evolution doesn't reverse itself. Once he levels up, he doesn't descend back into old patterns or old emotional frameworks to make others comfortable. He will treat you respectfully. He may even stay connected, but he will never again show up with the same innocence, the same trust, or the same emotional availability. The hurt opened a doorway into a stronger version of himself, and once he walked through it, that doorway closed behind him. His growth becomes the quiet proof that everything he experiences, even pain, is fuel for becoming someone wiser, calmer, and untouchable. Forgiving quietly doesn't make him weak. It makes him untouchable. He lets go to lighten his spirit, but he never lowers his standards again. Every wound becomes a lesson. Every disappointment becomes clarity, and every betrayal becomes a turning point that shapes a stronger, sharper, more self-aware version of him. He may still speak to you. He may still treat you kindly, but the version of himself you once knew no longer exists. Forgiveness frees him. Evolution protects him. If you want more insight into the psychology behind how Sigma males move, think, and transform, make sure you subscribe to Silent Wise and drop "Growth is Permanent" in the comments. More rare Sigma breakdowns are coming,